Good morning, Shane.
The fact the UN is issuing this, do they view global tourism as a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, it's their annual report, the big Fair and Fit Tour. The first of the big travel events of the year is taking place this week in Madrid. They see it as a good thing. The argument about is tourism a good or a bad thing, what used to be the UNWTO, some listeners would remember it as that, would always see tourism as a route for developing, particularly the underdeveloped countries. Less than 4% of the world tourist traffic goes to the poorest countries, mainly in Africa. So they see it as a way of improving people's economic situation. Sustainability, as we know it in Ireland, has a somewhat different meaning from what it does in other countries, where sustainability is putting a plate of food on the table at the end of the day.
Donald Trump is talking about the golden age of America beginning right now. Is this the golden age of tourism?
It's very spotty, and this is a bit of a problem that some places are roaring ahead, some are not. To give you an example, just back to Ireland, Shane, 6 of our 8 airports are now back to pre-pandemic levels. And they only reached that this year. The reason we're doing a little bit better than other countries is Ryanair is very, very strong. During the pandemic, they kept their pilots licensed and their aircraft certified. That meant they came roaring back. So they did about 197 million passengers last year, very, very far ahead of their nearest rival, Lufthansa. Aer Lingus I think they'll hit 11 million passengers last year, which just brings them back to pre-pandemic. And inbound into Ireland is nowhere near pre-pandemic. So while tourism has recovered, bits of it have recovered very, very well, as other bits have not. And it tends to be people who seize the opportunity. No better man than Michael O'Leary to do that.
So global tourism fully recovered from the pandemic, but in some places they're experiencing more tourism than they had even before COVID.
There's no doubt that some of the more familiar places, and Spain would be a good example. Ireland to Spain last year, the figures aren't in yet. They're will be about 11% of ahead of what it was pre-pandemic. Having fallen, it's come back to that level. But there's a lot of the big markets. America is a market that really hasn't seen its numbers come back to pre-pandemic. I was talking in Atlanta to the Brand USA, the CEO of Brand USA, just before Christmas. He was saying he hoped they would reach that figure in 2024. It's still not there. It's interesting that the over-tourism argument that you alluded to has come in on, particularly there were places that always had an over-tourism argument, which would be Barcelona, Venice, Dubrovnik, places like that. But some of the places that depend very heavily on tourism, like the Canary Islands and the Balearic Islands, have also joined that. It will be very interesting to see how that plays out in 2025, Shane.
Yeah, it's interesting that global tourism fully recovered from the pandemic, given all the talk about climate change, but also that we have conflicts going on around the world.
That's a big problem. It's caused havoc with international aviation. To give an example, the Chinese airlines can fly over Russia. The European airlines cannot. It adds a colossal amount onto your fuel bill and to your costs. Our European airlines are particularly people like Finnair, who had a very good, strong Asian traffic, which all passed over Russia. They're complaining heavily about that at the moment. The Middle East conflict, hopefully we're seeing a resolution there, but that caused flights to be diverted, and it devastated tourism in that whole region. Cruise ship calls, all of those sort of things. Conflict really, really disrupted travel over the last 2 years, coming out of the major disruption of the pandemic. Everybody in the industry is hoping things get back to some sort of semblance of normal as to where they were before. The climate change argument is a very European one. It's not, you don't hear it outside of particular places in Europe, Germany, Netherlands, a little bit of it in Ireland. Cause and effect with aviation is about 2% of emissions, and is moving towards reducing their dependence on carbon emissions. They would reduce it, they would remove it in the morning if we could get a safe way of burning hydrogen. But that's an argument that's very European. You don't actually hear it that much in the other continents. Changing times, Shane. Yes, indeed.
Just before I come on air, I was on Instagram. 4 people I follow on Instagram are in Vietnam right now. I'm just wondering what countries are going to experience growth this year. Morocco as well, everyone seems to be in.
Yeah, it really goes, Shane, where the access is. If you got direct flights, and we've no increase really in direct flights off the island. We've 18 new routes. That would be, some of them would be replacing existing ones. Part of that is the Dublin Airport passenger cap. Normally we'd have 18 new routes from Dublin itself. What we're looking from just outbound out of Ireland, 3 pretty exciting new American routes: the Nashville, Detroit, Indianapolis. The Detroit, Indianapolis would be regarded big inbound, and we depend very heavily on that inbound American market because 3 of the other inbound markets are not performing. Britain hasn't performed since Brexit. France and Germany are really not back there. People are going back to Asia for a reason. It was much slower to come out of the pandemic, and the access wasn't there. So places like Vietnam, there certainly has seen a huge surge. Beware, any listeners thinking of going to Vietnam, make sure you have that visa. It's one of the few countries where you still require a visa if you have an Irish passport to go in. I've heard of two friends of mine who only discovered this the night they were due to fly. So do keep an eye on that one, Shane.
Lots of people are there at the moment. Just finally, what are flight prices like now? I saw the direct Aer Lingus to the Ireland to Vegas flight is about 500-600 quid return on some days. Are flight prices okay, or are they rising?
We had a really good sale which finished at midnight, 179 each way, and for up till March, and then April to May, 199 each way. But what we'll see probably in the next few weeks is sort of this gaming, this airlines looking at consumers and consumers looking at airline. How much will people pay? I do expect prices to be a little bit higher this summer, and the main reason is something you've covered on your programme: aircraft supply. Boeing and Airbus not able to keep up with the order book, and Boeing ran into separate problems of their own. I noticed, for instance, this morning's news, one of the big Middle Eastern airlines, Tony Douglas's Riyadh Air, where Peter Bellew, another Irish guy, a lot of Irish people in aviation, Peter Bellew is working, they've put back their launch because of aircraft supply, and Eddie Wilson will be having a press conference Thursday morning. No doubt he'd be complaining about that as well.
Ryanair. Okay, Eoghan, thank you very much.
Always a great pleasure, Shane.